At DDI, we turn data-driven insights into dynamic leadership development, unlocking potential, sparking growth, driving performance, because better leaders create a better future.
Hello and welcome to today's webinar, HR Reality Check. You forecast revenue, why not talent? A few housekeeping tips before we begin. You can find today's slides in the additional resources section of your console. This webinar is being recorded and you will receive the link to watch on demand later today. The attendee chat is open and we encourage your comments and responses. And I see a lot coming in now, so thank you. And to submit a question to our presenters, please use the Ask a Question box located on the top right-hand side of your screen. And now let's bring in today's presenters, Jasmine Boatman, SVP of DDI's North American and Europe Operations, and April King, Manager of DDI's Adjunct Services. Welcome, ladies. We're excited to get going today.
Thanks, Kim. Really glad to be here. Today's webinar is the third in a third-part in a series where the first two webinars we spent time talking about why leaders need assessment and why assessments fail. And if you weren't able to join us, I can tell you that it felt like there was general agreement and consensus that, yes, we do need assessment. We do need objective data to make better decisions for our leaders of the future. But what April and I are here to talk about today is really going beyond the theoretical and the idealistic, and to take a moment to really get honest, a reality check, if you will, on why, despite the fact that we know we need assessment, the majority of organizations still don't use them as effectively or as often or as consistently as they need to. And why do we, as people professionals, often feel like we're in the position of convincing others to do what's good for the business and what they themselves say they need to do? So to illustrate this, what you see on the screen here is every 2 years, DDI conducts the most extensive and long-standing leadership study of its kind. We recently released our 2025 Global Leadership Forecast, examining the evolving dynamics of leadership practices and their business impact across industries and economies around the world. This year's study drew insight from over 10,000 leaders and over 2,000 organizations worldwide. What we found was that 233 CEOs revealed that the top 4 concerns keeping them up at night are attracting and retaining talent, slowing economic growth, navigating uncertainty, and developing the next generation of leaders. So I don't know about you, but this makes sense to me in this moment and for today's conversation, as economic uncertainty creates this need for us to be prepared for anything, but it also requires this paradox of both cost consciousness and cost cutting, while also needing to invest in our most valuable assets, which is our people. So as you look at this data, you might be checking your own reality and saying to yourself, but that's not how our organization spends its money or its time. And unfortunately, you're not alone. To be honest, I'm not sure this is an uncommon phenomenon outside of work. Like, how many of us are trying to be healthier? We know the salad's good for us. We know we need to be developing the next generation of leaders to navigate uncertainty, but it's not always the decision that we make. And not for bad intentions, but for other very real reasons. You know, in my role as both a scientist, I'm an IO psychologist by training, and a very, very long time ago, I led DDI's Center for Analytics that conducts this research that you see on the screen. So I believe in the science of what we do. And not to go hair club for men, for those of you that would understand that reference, I'm also a customer of our own practices, a practitioner. I've navigated my own part of this organization at DDI through the gravity of the past 5 years with all the ups and downs that's entailed. And I've had the privilege of doing that while talking to so many of our customers going through the exact same thing. So while I have an educated perspective and inherent belief in the science, at the end of the day, I too have had to be realistic and vigilant in prioritizing my team's time and what gets results. And during COVID, and even more recently, I would have loved the luxury of investing in people in so many more ways, but I have to admit that I too was forced to delay people initiatives and make decisions that I didn't want to due to budget and economic conditions, and just the reality of what we were able to get done. So the reason why I thought we'd kick off today with this is I thought this data was prime fodder Because the reality is that the slowing growth and the uncertainty in the markets, if you've watched any of the news this week and last week around earnings reports, pushes a lot of companies to reduce costs at a time when having the right talent becomes critical for moving from surviving to thriving, something we're all trying to do. The reality is, though, that strategic continuity during periods of financial pressure is really the singular focus of business leaders in times like this. But here's the good news. That's where all of you come in. So an area that we've been reporting on since 2018 is around the evolving role that HR needs to play within organizations. We looked at this in terms of 3 different roles you can see defined here. So partners, that's HR teams that collaborate with business leaders, but mainly execute on established strategies, compared to reactors, which are HR teams that primarily respond to immediate needs and focus on administrative tasks. And then there's the anticipators, the coveted anticipators, which are HR teams that proactively forecast future needs and drive strategic talent decisions aligned with business goals. And I'm going to ask you in a second which one you would sort of self-identify with. But what I'll share with you that our research shows that prior to the global pandemic, many HR organizations were playing more anticipator roles, meaning they were using data and analytics to predict talent gaps. They were forecasting future talent needs in their organization and working to mitigate those gaps. We also saw a large percentage of HR organizations being able to play a strong partner role where they collaborated with the business to work through challenges. But we saw a backslide of the percentage of HR that played anticipator or partner roles in their companies once the pandemic hit. I think instead HR found themselves playing a reactor type role, responding to immediate needs, and for very good reasons. In our most recent results, you can see that the role of HR in many cases seems to be stuck in a reactive state. Again, I think there's a lot of legitimate reasons for this. There's been a switch from remote to hybrid work. There's been advancements in AI. There's been reductions in workforce. Just a few examples of things that impact HR's world greatly. But before I tell you why these different roles are so important, I do want to just take a second and see, given what I've described of these 3 roles, what role do you feel like you and your organization, your HR organization, are currently playing in your organizations today? I'll just give you a few seconds to sort of think about that before I share with you the power of our role. All right, it looks like a large part of you, hopefully you can see the results on the screen, 87% are selected partner roles and 13% selected anticipator roles. So I think the partner role is such an important role. But what I want to share with you is the power of the anticipatory role. So what the research shows is that when HR is more anticipatory, their companies were 2.1 times more likely to use assessments in hiring, succession, and development decisions, which is what you need to do the systematic forecasting of the needs and the gaps. First, you have to gather the data. But the results of that data is a lot more important than just the gathering of the data. And the results show that higher quality leaders result. Anticipators report 62% higher leaders compared to 44% for reactors. The other results are high potential success rates. Anticipators lead at 69% versus 51% for reactors. Anticipators are also 3 times more likely to make better hiring decisions. They're 1.4 times more likely to respond to change effectively. And they're 4 times more likely to have a strong leadership bench to fill critical leadership roles in the future. So as your CEO and your leaders are up at night trying to figure out how to navigate in an environment where change will often outpace readiness, the strategic orientation of HR is no longer just a nice to have. It has a measurable and significant impact on both the leadership quality and the business outcomes that your organization needs. And today what we want to do is help equip you to be better anticipators and leverage data and outcomes as your ultimate value proposition that supports your organization in successfully navigating our uncertain future. Business leaders will have a much harder time deprioritizing initiatives when you make a case focused on business outcomes like these. So what I'd like to do now is turn it over to my partner in crime, April, who has some great examples of exactly how to do this.
Great. Thanks so much, Jasmine. It's a pleasure to be with you here today. And to kick things off, we're going to go deeper into your reality so that we can really keep our conversation grounded today. So the question that we would like to ask you now is, what's standing in your way of showing up as an anticipator? The reality is we all want to be in that anticipator role, and we strive to do that, but there are organizational realities that get in the way sometimes, or are challenges for us to be able to really show up as an anticipator in every way that we want to. So this question is really trying to understand from each of you, what are the barriers that you're facing in your organization that are preventing you from not being able to show up as an anticipator and really demonstrate those behaviors that you want to and need to for the organization and for the leaders in your organization. So we'll give a couple more seconds here to see what all of the barriers are that people are facing and see what we come up with in terms of, or do we have common realities in terms of the barriers that we're addressing and moving towards. So we'll give a couple more seconds here to see what the poll comes up with, and then we'll see the results. All right, let's look at this. I'm very curious about this myself. So a few of the ones that come to the top of the list is there are other fires to fight right now. And that relates to what Jasmine was talking about in terms of all of the realities facing organizations today, all of the macro environment that we're dealing with and how we're navigating through that. Another strong contender for a barrier are the no buy-in from senior stakeholders, some challenge with data and not knowing what we need to forecast in terms of talent, and not knowing whether or not we have the right data for the future. So there's a future orientation to that as well. So we really crossed the board on terms of all of the barriers that each of you are facing, and some of you might be facing multiple of these. So when we think about all of those barriers, they really fall into three primary categories that we hear from our HR partners and other leaders in the organization, is that this is not something that my leaders are able to prioritize right now, or we have the data, we have a lot of data, so why do we need more data? And then I'm not really sure what's needed for the future. So when we think about business leaders not prioritizing, this is really a familiar concern, and there can be this disconnect between a leadership strategic goals and the perceived value of talent initiatives. The key here is to reframe that conversation and show that this is not a technical necessity, but a strategic enabler, and really reframe the conversation. So how can we better communicate the strategic value to our decision makers within the organization? In that middle section around data, so we've talked a lot in these series of webinars about data, and the reality is that all of you are sitting on a ton of data. So you've got performance information, 360 data, engagement scores, but having data isn't the same as using it effectively. So the real challenge here is, how do we turn data into actionable insights? So it's not about quantity, it's really about relevance. So thinking about what are the barriers that are preventing you from turning it into actionable insights. And that will be something that you can frame thinking your conversation as you go forward. And then lastly, not sure of what's needed for the future. This is totally understandable given the dynamic environment that we're living in today and how ever evolving and rapid evolvement things are happening. It's difficult to predict the skills, tools, and strategies that are really essential. So really having that adaptability component within your strategy and the continuous learning are really crucial so that you can build systems and cultures that evolve with those changing needs. So thinking about what skills and capabilities do we need to develop now for what's coming next? And that's a hard place to be in. But if you think about this, every objection or every barrier that we face is a doorway to growth and really an invitation to step into that mindset of an anticipator. So in the next few slides, I'm excited to share with you some powerful case examples of where we've seen organizations not just face these challenges, but really transform them into breakthroughs. And every story is shaped by unique cultural and organizational priorities, but together they'll spark ideas and inspire you to lean confidently into that role of anticipator. So let's start with my business leaders won't prioritize this and thinking about some practical next steps. So a couple of organizations that I want to mention that have, as I said, transformed and addressed these challenges head on. One is Edwards, which is a global vacuum manufacturer that really needed to focus on rapid growth, and it demanded more than technical expertise, but really required leaders that could inspire, engage, and drive change. In the same vein of that, LyondellBasell is also in the process of going through a transformation, a strategic transformation that wasn't just about systems, but about aligning people and purpose with their strategy. Both are focused on growth and transformation, but recognized and presented to their leadership teams that without capable leader, that strategy that they had would stall. And so building the case for talent development and starting with the big picture, both Edwards and Lyondell were really faced with that growth and transformation and thinking about how they were going to position leaders to really get them where they needed to go and to inspire the change that was necessary, not just with systems, but with capable leaders. And also thinking about leadership development as that strategic lever. So how do you have the conversation with your primary stakeholders, those senior leaders in an organization? And in the Edwards case, really focus on purpose, inclusion, and influence. And having their senior leaders pulled into and see how it tied directly to the business outcomes. It really enabled them to show and demonstrate that the support for talent development and talent evolution was coming from the top. And in the case of Lyondell, they really focused on creating a competency framework that showed the connection between business strategy and the behaviors necessary for their leaders. So that senior sponsorship is a non-negotiable. And really, when you're thinking about how to move a culture, it's definitely critical in terms of getting that initiative and moving it forward. So aligning that talent with strategy. So here's what success can look like, is really thinking about how do you encourage leaders to sponsor and participate in development programs and really ensure that those systems and talents are aligned with the strategic goals. In addition to that, making it scalable, sustainable, and being able to measure impact is critical to start out with in the beginning to show the impact that you anticipate the program's having and how do you get your senior leaders to move forward with that. When leadership development is done right, it doesn't just support the business, it actually accelerates it. And that's the conversation that we want to have with stakeholders across the organization. So moving on to our next category of challenge and primary barriers is really, I already have a lot of data and I've tried to use it in a lot of different ways. And if we think about it, most organizations have a lot of data on their leaders. And it could be performance reviews, engagement scores, 360 feedback, but it's not about having the data, it's about knowing what to do with it. And thinking about how to prepare leaders for the futures, this is where organizations can get stuck. So we wanted to highlight here about how you can really accelerate development through the lens of data, and that combination of leveraging assessment data along with development is really powerful. And we've seen that as a success story with organizations that we've worked with. Recently, we've been partnering with Hormel, which is an organization which is really focused, again, on transformation and wanting to focus on their VP level or leaders that have the capability to stretch up into the VP level. But it was targeted for them. So they leveraged the Leader 3 Ready assessment to prepare leaders going through development so that the development was really personalized and made it a powerful engagement for them. The other thing that we find with assessment is that assessment doesn't work on its own. It really needs to be paired with coaching. In order for it to get interesting for an individual is to really think about how they can target their development. It really starts to multiply the effect. In fact, in our global leadership forecast, companies that combine assessment, coaching, and development are 1.8 times more likely to be in the top 10 financial performers across industries. That's a huge business case for investing in leadership development the right way. It's not about identifying potential, but really about activating it. So when we think about what success looks like here, it's really thinking about how you anchor development and succession decisions with validated and predictive data. And business simulations really help us be able to do that. And we also want to think about how do we pair assessments with coaching and development to truly maximize development. And that's where the power of that comes into play. Hormel is still in the process of being able to show those results. So we'll be excited to share more with you soon about the measures that they have coming out of their exciting programs that they're in the process of executing now. So in our final challenge, and sometimes I would say the most challenging barrier that we face is I'm not sure what's needed for the future. So we're all transforming, growing, and setting bold goals, but being able to translate that into knowing what kind of leaders we need to get us there, that's really the question that one of our clients has boldly been engaging and answering, and that's GE Healthcare, who is really taking on the initiative to rebuild with purpose. So when GE Healthcare became an independent, they had a clean slate, but rather than jumping right into development programs, they asked themselves, what kind of leadership will fuel our future? And they used executive interviews and cultural insights to build a framework that was aligned with their strategy. It wasn't guesswork, it was intentional design. And really, another client that we've seen great success with and boldly going into the future is Entergy. So Entergy took a slightly different but equally powerful approach where they aligned their leadership development with their path to premier strategy. So they use curated playlists, development accessible across the enterprise, and really directly tying it to performance and business outcome. They didn't stop there, though. They also built success profiles and used strong assessment data to really guide their succession planning and identify high potential talent. So both of those organizations, GE Healthcare and Entergy, they didn't just have leadership data, and they didn't just collect it, they really activated it. So when you think about what success looks like, and by the way, I'm just going to highlight that GE Healthcare just won a gold award in the Brandon Hall Awards. So congratulations to them. Got that noted on the slide here. But when you think about what we can learn from these stories, it's really about how do we start with strategy and think about how do we define what future-ready leadership looks like in our organization, and being able to use data to go beyond those performance reviews, use assessment and success profiles to really accelerate and tie it to real business outcomes. I can see all the applause for GE Healthcare. That is a very exciting thing to celebrate for them. So if you're not sure what your leaders need for the future, you're not alone, but you don't have to guess. What these two organizations show us is that with the right tools and alignment, we can build leadership strategies that prepare us for what's coming next. So I've only shared just the surface of these stories with you. We have some more information that you can download, but I want to turn it back to Jasmine, as she's going to share some more ways that you can engage with our clients and learn from them as we move forward.
Thanks, April. I think you did a great job mentioning examples of several organizations who are leading the charge and that we can continue to learn from. So I wanted to take a moment and really highlight these examples of anticipators. And if you want to learn more about these stories and many others, remind you that the DDI Better Leaders Summit is November 10th through 12th in Scottsdale, Arizona, and we'll have a link there for you to register. It promises to be 2.5 days of actionable insights and interactive workshops and the networking opportunities that we all love, designed for strategic HR professionals that are trying to anticipate their organization's needs. So again, if you'd like to register, check out the link on the screen and then let your DDI contact know, and we'll make sure that we secure you a spot. So as we wrap up here, I think what April and I wanted to make sure we do is deliver on ROI for you. We've been talking about the importance of HR delivering on outcomes. So our hope is that we've delivered some ROI for you in your time today. I'm sorry for those who are having technical difficulties. But we hope what you're walking away with are some ideas and some stories that maybe have inspired you to become the leader your organization not only wants, but can't succeed without. It's hard to argue that the world is changing. And I think HR is no exception to this evolve or die adage. And as a profession in the age of analytics and AI, I think it's critical that we move from insight to impact. You know, I'm not sure the days of having an aha moment or simply justifying our costs are enough. To be contributors in the future, we need to align, anticipate, and act. I think that's the real HR advantage. And what will come from that is the ROI from better hiring, faster development, fewer leadership failures, and all those things help move HR from a cost center to a true profit driver. Also in the links to resources, we'll link for you our latest T&D article in the T&D magazine here for you as well today. So I know if I check time, we might have a chance to check out a few of your questions that came in. I think one of the questions was, how do you make sure you're interpreting data correctly in an organization that likes to spin data in lots of different ways? I think that's a really great question. I think that's a common challenge with any kind of data. I think to April's point earlier, gathering the data is one thing, making decisions with them is another. But what I would encourage you to think about in interpreting data is to really think about it from an outcome perspective. I answered another question in the chat about that, making sure you're thinking about the business KPIs. Those are the things that a lot of business leaders will be focused on. So the second that you say things that are tied to their critical roles, critical strategic objectives they're trying to drive, things that they've said are short-term priorities, that might catch their attention. The other thing I might ask you to think about too in interpreting data is timing of when you share the data. I think when you talk about your great plans for strategies, if you time that with your annual reviews when people are looking at talent or key leadership executive meetings where they're talking about talent, you might be more likely to traipse on a convergence of focus for those executives. So those are a couple of things that came to mind. April, would you have anything to add to this very good question?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think reflects the reality for different organizations. But one thing I was thinking, and I don't know that I highlighted this when we were talking about assessments, is business simulations are a way to get objective data. And sometimes if we're looking at data that is informed by only assessment data from 360, we know there's some bias that comes into that. So one of the things is to look at when you're assessing your data landscape and the assessment data that you have, is there some aspect of objective data that is a part of that? Because that would be harder to manipulate. Not that you couldn't, but that would be another factor that I would add to the mix there.
I think that's a great point. The right data for the right question that you're trying to answer is also a critical thing to look at. But I want to be sensitive to everybody's time. We thank you so much, April, and I thank you for joining. We thank you for your patience with us through some technical difficulties, and we hope we've delivered on your expectations. Kim?
Thank you, Jasmine and April, for the rich information you presented today. So we hope to see everyone on our September webinar. The information is in the console. You can go ahead and register for that today. Thank you again, and we hope to see you in September. Have a great rest of your day.